No one inside the paddock expected what would unfold during these opening minutes, and the sight of the world champions struggling would soon change the entire narrative of the weekend. As the green light flickered over the Circuito de Jerez, the air was thick with the scent of high-octane fuel and the heavy weight of expectation. Toprak Razgatlıoğlu, the man who had redefined the limits of the BMW M 1000RR, rolled out of the garage looking like a shadow of his usual self. Within 3 laps, the staggering reality surfaced. The invincible El Turco was a passenger on a machine that refused to communicate. Observers at Turn 1 noticed it immediately. The bike wasn't diving under braking with its usual surgical precision. Instead, it looked unsettled, forcing the champion to miss apexes by a wide margin. For a rider whose entire philosophy is built on front-end confidence, this wasn't just a slow start. It was a systemic collapse of his primary weapon. The timing screens told a grim story as Toprak lingered outside the top 10, a position that felt entirely alien for a rider of his caliber. Reports from trackside suggested that the bike appeared wooden, lacking the organic flow required to navigate the technical layout of the Spanish circuit. The paddock held its breath as the lap times failed to drop, and for the first time in months, the aura of dominance that had surrounded the BMW camp began to fracture. It wasn't just about the seconds lost, it was the visible frustration in his body language. This opening stint was a public trial, revealing that even the most gifted riders are at the mercy of their machinery. But behind that calm visor, the pressure was building fast as the telemetry revealed a terrifying truth that the cameras couldn't catch. To understand why Toprak was struggling, one must look at the delicate physics of his riding style. He relies on a stop-style entry where the rear wheel is barely skimming the asphalt, placing the entirety of the bike's stress on the front tire. In the opening session at Jerez, this connection was severed. The bike's front-end stability had vanished, replaced by a vague, mushy feeling that prevented him from trusting the grip levels. Every time he attempted to lean into the high-speed sweepers, the machine pushed wide, a clear indicator that the weight distribution was fundamentally flawed. Technical insiders suggested that the fork settings were failing to provide the necessary feedback, leaving Toprak blind at nearly 200 miles per hour. While his rivals, including a surging Nicolo Bulega and a resurgent Alvaro Bautista, were clicking into a rhythmic flow, Toprak was caught in a mechanical limbo. He was seen shaking his head after running wide at the dry sack corner, a rare display of vulnerability. The main issue was suspected to be a mismatch between the new electronics mapping and the mechanical grip of the rear tire, which caused the bike to squat too much under acceleration. This technical imbalance didn't just cost him time, it destroyed his ability to defend his line. For 15 agonizing minutes, the world champion looked pathetic compared to the sharp, aggressive rivals who were capitalizing on his misfortune. The dream of a smooth weekend was quickly evaporating into a nightmare of technical confusion and paddock whispers. Inside the ROKiT BMW garage, whispers began spreading that a complete mechanical overhaul was the only way to save the weekend from total disaster. A quarter of the way through the session, the team made the executive decision to recall Toprak for an emergency intervention. The atmosphere was clinical but electric with the kind of stress only found at the highest level of professional racing. This wasn't a moment for minor adjustments. This was a moment for mechanical surgery. The discussion between Toprak and his crew chief was reportedly intense, focusing on a complete reapproach to the bike's geometry. Mechanics were seen frantically adjusting the swing arm pivot and altering the front suspension's preload, trying to find a balance that would allow Toprak to feel the limit again. It was a high-stakes gamble. If these changes didn't work, Toprak would enter the afternoon qualifying session with zero confidence and a fragmented setup. Beyond the hardware, the electronics engineers were buried in their laptops, remapping the traction control systems to provide a smoother yet more visceral response. They needed to stop the bike from pumping on the exit of slow corners, a problem that had hampered his acceleration and ruined his lap times. The tension was palpable as the clock ticked down. Every minute spent on the stands was a minute his rivals were using to perfect their race pace. This mid-session reconstruction was a testament to the team's trust in Toprak's feedback. But as he sat waiting, the skepticism in the paddock was growing. Most experts believed that such a broken feeling could not be fixed in a single session, yet the twist that followed would stun even his harshest critics. And from that moment, nothing would ever be the same as the paddock witnessed a metamorphosis that defied the laws of mid-session testing. When Toprak finally re-entered the track with less than 15 minutes remaining, the transformation was nothing short of staggering. The first lap was a tentative probe, but by the second flyer, the old Toprak had returned. The bike no longer looked like a wild animal trying to buck its rider, it looked like a tool of precision. The signature late-braking maneuvers that had been missing for the first half of the hour were back with a vengeance. He was diving into the apexes with a ferocity that suggested the front-end blindness had been cured. The technical changes to the weight distribution had clearly worked, allowing him to trail brake deep into the corners without the fear of the front tire folding. His lap times began to tumble, moving him from the bottom of the pack into the competitive upper tier within just 3 rotations of the circuit. What made this performance so remarkable was the psychological shift. He wasn't just riding the bike, he was commanding it. The traction control adjustments were clearly bearing fruit, as he was able to open the throttle significantly earlier, maximizing his exit speed in sectors where he had previously been losing tenths. The split time surge was evident on the timing screens, with Toprak setting personal bests in every sector. It was a masterclass in resilience, showing that the BMW camp could identify and rectify a major crisis under the ticking clock of a live session. He began setting times that mirrored the leading group, proving that the technical disaster of the morning was merely a temporary setback. Yet the real turning point happened away from the cameras, as the psychological impact of this comeback began to ripple through the rival team boxes. While Toprak didn't finish the session at the absolute top of the standings, his recovery was a powerful statement of intent. In the high-stakes game of MotoGP and WorldSBK, the mental war is often won on Fridays. By turning a miserable performance into a competitive one in less than 40 minutes, Toprak sent a chilling message to the Ducati and Kawasaki camps. Even when he is at his weakest, he is still a threat. In the post-session debrief, Toprak didn't hide his disappointment with the start, admitting it was one of the worst feelings he'd ever experienced at Jerez. However, his focus was entirely on the solution, highlighting how the changes to the geometry and electronics had saved his weekend. This level of composure is what separates a champion from a standard rider. Many would have folded under the pressure of such a poor start, but Toprak used it as a springboard for improvement. The data gathered during that frantic mid-session overhaul will likely be the foundation for his success in the upcoming races. Rumors in the paddock suggested that his rivals were surprised by the speed of the BMW's adaptation, as many expected Toprak to struggle until at least Saturday morning. If he could bridge such a massive gap in just one session, his potential for the main race is terrifying. The Jerez anomaly proved that the one plate isn't just about speed, it's about the ability to survive a crisis. However, the twist that followed in the afternoon would leave even his closest team members stunned, proving that the storm was far from over.